What's up YouTube? This is Jake with Kahnjah Beats. I had a request in another tutorial from a Mike Sandoval about one of my tracks in the beat store called Chaos. First of all, I just want to say thanks, Mike, for noticing all the evolution and the different sounds and the chord progression in that song. It's nice to hear that somebody else can hear that and appreciate it. It makes me feel like it's worth it when I put time into that. A lot of beats nowadays are just really repetitive, so I like to mix it up every once in a while, and I'm glad that you were able to appreciate that. So first off, thanks to Mike. But yeah, let's jump into it. Alright, so I've got the track pulled up here. First, let's just go ahead and listen to it and see what he's talking about. I've got it looped to the exact region that he's talking about, so listen for the sound to evolve, listen for the different layers of chords to come in, and then towards the end here, listen for the drums to start popping, and I will go over how I make that happen with sidechain compression. So let's listen to this section first, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so first we'll talk about the evolving sound, and we'll also talk about making the drums pop through, and then I'm going to jump over to another track and we will go more over chord progression. Alright, so as far as evolving your sound, one of the first tips I have is to add these little locators in Ableton. Just right click, add locator, you can rename them, don't be afraid to move them around if you end up changing your structure later. But they help a lot. They help keep me organized and realize what I'm looking for, what I'm listening for at a certain part of the track. I've got the same melody playing on 3 different octaves. I've named them accordingly: the low main chords, mid main, high main chords, and they're all grouped together in this channel. So the low chords are pretty simple. It's the same melody, but it's just in a low octave, low frequency. Nothing special going on there, just fills out the sound. The mid main chords is where most of the action is at. So I'm just going to solo this for you, and the automation that you see here is a filter sweep, and that is a huge part of the sound becoming more rich and full, as you mentioned. Basically we start low here and we are cutting out all the frequencies above this, and we click on frequency to bring open the automation line, and then I just drew in a gentle curve so that it opens up and lets more of the sound of the synth in over time. And then with the high octave, there's not much of a filter sweep or anything going on, but I wait to bring those in until I want the full sound in there. So the low is running all the time, the mid range is being filter sweeped, and then the high range doesn't come in until I want the full sound. Once you get to the full sound and everything mixes together, you end up with what we have. Alright, so when we talk about tracks evolving over time, you'll notice that we don't even hear the mid chords or the high chords until this part of the song. That alone gives a lot of sense of building, because you haven't heard that full of a sound until we get, I think you said it's about 1 minute and 45 seconds into the track. So right away that's doing a lot to evolve the sound of the track over time. Yeah, so as far as evolving and making the sound grow, most of what you're hearing is just coming through this auto filter here and letting more and more frequency into the mix as it builds up. Alright, so moving on to where you said the drums sound like they really start to pop. So I let all these chords in, full chords in for this long, and then I start to bring the chords out at about here. And as these chords are going out, that is when I actually add the gritty bass that you're hearing. I wish I had the preset for you, but I froze this all to audio already. I'm sure it wasn't anything too special and massive. Just a full sounding synth that I EQ'd a lot of the top end out of. I added some erosion on there to kind of widen the noise, some reverb and things like that. The reason that you feel like the drums are punching through so much right here, the first big reason is because these chords are falling off. They're getting quieter. I've got a lot of delay and reverb and things like that to get rid of these chords. It took up so much sound that I needed to get, I wanted the chords to be out of the track, but I didn't want it to be too abrupt, and that's why I added so much delay and reverb. But the big bulk of why the drums sound like they're popping is from sidechaining. So I've got all of these grouped into different groups here. So for the chords group, you'll see here that I have them sidechained to the kick drum, and that's where you hear like kind of the pulsing. Basically the chords are ducking out of the way every time the kick comes in. So we'll just give you a listen to that really quick. You can also see that I'm bringing down the threshold over time, and that makes the sidechain effect a lot stronger as those are fading out, so that it becomes, the drums are punching through more and more. I've also got a sidechain on the group that has the bass in there. It's hitting pretty hard if I remember right, getting a lot of that sound out of the way. Let's take a listen to that. Listen for where the kick is punching through. So everywhere you see that ducking down is where the kick drum is happening. Sidechaining is awesome for making your drums stand out in a mix. The way to do it is just grab a simple compressor, throw it on the channel. You want to open up this little tab here. It's going to ask you what would you like to sidechain this from, which signal. So go ahead and select sidechain, and this is where I selected the kick. You can put your snare in there, you can sidechain anything from anything basically. That's why the drums sound like they're punching through so much, is because I have everything else sidechained to that kick drum. So every time that kick drum is hitting, all of the sound is getting out of the way, and it really gives for us that effect, like the drums are really punching through and hitting hard there. Alright, so to recap, a good way to make sounds feel like they are growing or getting bigger or more rich over time is to use these auto filter sweeps. Just go ahead and select a channel, drop an auto filter on there, click on frequency, and then draw in the automation that you'd like. Alright, so let's hop over to another track and we will go over chord progression. Alright, so for chord progression, just a quick disclaimer, I am not classically musically trained by any means. I basically just use my ears and listen for what I want to hear and work from that. I know the basics, semitones, chords, I know very, very basic music theory. So let me just preface everything I'm going to say with that. Alright, so let's take a quick listen to what we've got going on here. So this is a much shorter melody that loops more often and more frequent than the other track we were just working with. The other track was at least double that, so it would basically be this long, and then I had changed up the last note. So just go with your ears, go with what feels right. A lot of hip-hop use short melodies that loop, and occasionally you'll hear one that's a little bit longer. So again, without being musically trained, it's basically going to boil down to using your ears. If you've listened to enough music, you will know what sounds right and what does not sound right. So for example, if I just move one of these chords to a different position, you can feel and you can hear the total difference in those. So use your ears, stack chords, and use your ears of what you want to hear. If you want it to be sadder, just keep playing with the notes until it sounds a little more sad. If you want it to be happier, use a lot more of the major or white keys. Just use your ears and just play and play and play. This is probably the weakest part of my beat production, I feel like, is my melodic skills and my just general music skills. I know that sounds crazy, but this is definitely the part that I struggle with the most. I would say that I could build drums all day with no problem, but when it comes to actually coming up with a good melody that is listenable, that I actually want to hear and I can stand listening to for hours on end, that will take me a lot longer than building the drums or a bass line or something like that. So this track ended up being pretty simple as far as the chord progression. It's the same melody all the way throughout, and then I've cut out chunks here and there, and then I have stacked a lot of different layers of the same melody to make the sound more full. Alright, let's jump over to another track where I've got some serious chord progression going on, and that will help me explain better what's going on. Alright, so this is more of a trance song I was working on quite a while back, but it really does display the chord progression, and it kind of breaks it down in a lot more simple way. So what you can see here, these aren't even chords necessarily, these are just notes. We'll give it a quick listen so you can hear what's going on. So one thing that I do know and that I will suggest is to, I believe they call it resolving the melody. And that basically means that if you're going to start down here at a G, by the time you end and you're getting ready to loop back around, you don't want to be too far off of your G, your root key here. You want to be somewhere that sounds natural to come back. If I were to end way up here and then jump back down to this G3, it just doesn't sound right. So resolving your melodies is big. In this particular track, I've added 3 different layers of this same basic chord progression. I know it's not technically chords, but it's the same difference here. So we'll listen to this one by itself. And then I've added one more final layer here in the middle. So you'll also notice that these notes are not directly layered on top of each other, they are staggered. And this is more of a trance thing, more of an EDM thing than I'd really use in hip hop. But let's listen to all 3 and see what we hear. So that's a pretty thick, full sound there. And although these aren't chords, chord progression is the same basic idea. So this is actually a helpful tip for me, is a lot of times I will start with just single notes, and then I will go in later and add the appropriate chords to thicken out the sound. And when you're adding chords, just play around. If you know any musical theory, you'll know that there's seconds, there's thirds, there's fifths, and sevenths. Those are semitones away from the root chord or the root key. But just use your ears, just play around. You'll be able to hear if something doesn't sound right. So just play around, find the chords that you like, find something that will loop well and that you can stand to listen to. If you're working on a melody or a chord progression and you get tired of it, if you're tired of it, somebody else is going to get tired of it. So stick with things that are interesting to listen to and make sure that your melodies are resolving. And just for some shits and giggles, I'll let you listen to this chord progression with the kick drum in the back. Alright, so lastly, I'm going to open up a new file here and we will build a melody from scratch and try some chord progressions and see what happens. Alright, so I'm just going to grab a plugin really quick. We'll use something simple. I like that. I don't really like the sharp attack on there. Let me take that off really quick. Alright. Oh, I hate brown. Wish I could take brown out. Alright, so let's do a quick melody chord progression here and see what we can come up with. So like I said before, sometimes it helps me to start with just one note. And typically major keys or the white keys on the piano have more of a happy vibe, and the black keys have more of a sad vibe. Of course you can combine them for all kinds of different sounds. And again, I wish I was more musically trained, but I'm not. I just use my ears until I find something that I enjoy. So for some major chords, we'll start with a C. And then we'll just start adding in some more notes to build a chord. So you can tell what sounds right and what doesn't sound right. So I can tell that going from major to minor might be a good chord progression, so let's try that. Just go ahead and duplicate that. And then I'll move this up. Duplicate it again. Try something different. And then again, to resolve the melody, I'll probably just use this one again. And let's see what that gives us. So we could stick with that. A lot of hip-hop songs do just have the short 4-bar melodies or chord progressions there. If you want it to go longer, like the Chaos track that you mentioned, just duplicate that, join those together, and then make some sort of variation. See, that's an example of knowing that that does not sound right. So, I mean, yeah, just use your ears. You'll know if it's correct or not. That's mostly how I make all of my different chords and chord progressions, is I just play with something and I play with the different chords and the different notes until I hear what I know is right and musically correct. It's pretty obvious if something is not musically correct. And then I will choose whether I want to loop that short or if I want to make it longer and make some variations and go from there. Alright, well, hopefully this video helped you out, Mike. But yeah, we'll leave this one where we're at and we will pick up with some more tutorials I've got coming out. Best of luck to everybody out there producing. Go make some beats, go make some new chords, some new chord progressions. Sidechain your drums, get those things to pop through, and try using some auto filter sweeps to make your sound grow. Alright guys, that does it for this one. Thanks again to Mike Sandoval for leaving the request. If you guys have any more questions or need help with anything, feel free to hit me up in the comments and I'll do my very best to get back to you as soon as I can. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, notifications, the bell, all that fun jazz, and let's keep making some beats and learning together. I'd really like to grow the YouTube channel, and anything you can do to help me would be much appreciated. We'll see you next time.